When was the last time a prospect sat across from you and willingly told you their deepest financial fear? Not because you asked, but because they wanted to. Now, if you're like most advisors, the answer is almost never. And that's not your fault. You've been taught to run discovery like a checklist. What's your net worth? What are your goals? What keeps you up at night? That sort of thing. The problem is the moment you ask a direct question about something sensitive, money, fear, legacy, stuff like that, the moment you ask about that, the prospect's brain goes into defense mode, and defense mode kills trust. Now, I've worked with hundreds of advisors over the years, and almost all of them use some version of the same discovery process: a list of questions, a fact finding form, a risk tolerance profile. And they wonder why prospects give them surface level answers. Oh, I just want to retire comfortably. I just want a rate of return. I just want to make sure my kids are taken care of. Those aren't real answers. Those are safe answers because the prospect doesn't trust you yet. And the reason they don't trust you is because you're treating discovery like an interrogation. Okay. So here's what most advisors don't understand. The human brain is wired to protect sensitive information: money, fear, shame, regret. Those are all things that actually drive financial decisions, but they're also the things that we're least likely to reveal when someone asks us directly. Why? Because questions trigger scrutiny. So the moment you ask, "What's your biggest financial fear?" the prospect's brain says, "Why do they want to know? What are they going to do with this information?" And then they shut down. But statements invite connection because the brain doesn't evaluate statements the same way it evaluates questions. It just responds. Now, quick context. I'm Dr. Joshua Wilson. Started as an advisor with zero base salary. I built my book from scratch, closed hundreds of millions in AUM, and eventually sold the firms I led. And early on, I struggled with discovery. Prospects would sit across from me and I'd ask all the right questions and get almost nothing. Why not? Because the brain doesn't respond to extraction. It responds to invitation. Okay. And now I help advisors engineer that invitation into their growth strategy. Because discovery isn't about pulling information, it's about creating the conditions where prospects want to share. Okay. So I know you want to see how this works. So there is a link in the description to book a call. But how do you shift from interrogation to invitation? You use what I call strategic statements. These are statements designed to trigger one of three psychological responses. Okay? Correction, clarification, and connection. Let me show you how this works. Okay? The first technique is the provocative observation. This is where you make a statement about the industry or people in the prospect's position. It's not a question, it's a statement. And here's an example. So instead of saying something like, "What's your biggest concern about retirement?" you say, "I found that most entrepreneurs at your age are more worried about protecting their blind spots than chasing another percentage point of return." Now, what just happened? You didn't ask them to reveal anything. You just made an observation. And their brain has two options. One, they could agree, which means you've just named their exact fear, or they could disagree, which means they're going to correct you and tell you what they're actually worried about. Either way, you win because you've just revealed their real priority without making them feel like they were interrogated. Now, have you ever noticed how prospects open up more when you don't ask direct questions? If you have, drop me a one-liner in the comments and tell me about it. Okay, the second technique is the assumptive problem. This is where you state a common problem as if it's a fact. So not, do you struggle with X, but the biggest challenge for families with generational wealth is often the communication, not the portfolio allocation. See what I did there? I didn't ask if they have a communication problem. I just stated that most families do. And if that's their problem, they're going to say, yes, exactly. That's what we're dealing with. And now you've opened the door to a real conversation, not just about asset allocation or fee structures, but about the emotional issue that's actually driving their decision. And when you get into the emotional issue that's what's driving their decision, now they feel seen. Now they feel related to. Now they feel like you understand them. You're forming connection. Now, if this is landing, subscribe and share this with an advisor who's tired of surface level discovery. Now, the third technique is the third party story. This is the most powerful one. You share a brief, anonymous story that mirrors the issue that you suspect the prospect has. Here's how it works. Instead of asking, are you worried about your kids squandering the inheritance? You say, I worked with a family years ago, successful business, great wealth, but the parents were terrified their kids weren't ready for it. They didn't want to say it out loud, but the fear was eating them alive. Now, if that's the prospect's fear, they're going to lean in. They're going to say, that's exactly what I'm worried about. And you didn't have to ask. You just gave them permission to admit it. Because the story wasn't about them. It was about someone else. And that makes it safe. What's one story that you've told that completely changed the dynamic of a meeting? Let me know in the comments. Now, here's what happens when you master these three techniques. Discovery stops being a checklist. It becomes a conversation. The prospect doesn't feel analyzed anymore. They feel understood. And when they feel understood, they reveal everything. Not because you pulled it out of them, but because you created the conditions where they wanted to share. That's the difference between interrogation and invitation. Interrogation triggers defense. Invitation triggers trust. So stop for a second and think about it. Have you ever had a prospect tell you something deeply personal without you asking? What made that moment happen? Drop your experience below. Tell me about it. Now, when you get this right, something amazing happens. Your prospects start seeing themselves. They start selling themselves on working with you because you've demonstrated something that no other advisor has. You get them. Not because you ask better questions, but because you created a space where they could be honest. And honesty is the very foundation of trust. So the formal close, it's not a close anymore. It's just a confirmation. Now, if you want to engineer this into your process, see the link in the description to book an only option growth strategy session. We'll map out where your discovery is triggering defense and build a plan to shift to invitation. Discovery, it's not about pulling information. It's about creating the conditions where prospects want to share. When you master that, you'll never struggle with surface level answers again. Thanks for joining me.